Every cemetery has a ghost story. Every ghost story has a true story. And I'm Harry, and this is Spectral Evidence. Hi, I'm Harry, and you are?
I'm Mary Brundage from the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
And we're here in New Boston for it's a fundraiser, correct?
Yep, it's a cemetery tour. This is the first year we've had this event. This is an event to, the funding for this will go to the General John Stark Scenic Byway.
We filmed this episode today to bring awareness about the John Stark Byway project and also make a point about cemetery preservation. The best stories in a cemetery in broad daylight.
There was no need for paranormal experts or psychics to contact the dead at the New Boston Cemetery. Volunteers of this community came together to ensure the spirits of these past residents will never fade away.
Up here.
How I ended up here? He murdered me.
That wasn't nice.
No, it wasn't. But he was obsessed with me and had said that if he couldn't marry me, he would murder me, and sure enough, he did.
Can you explain a little?
Who wouldn't be obsessed with this beautiful woman here? So I loved her madly, and she returned my affections.
In the beginning.
But then Mrs. Bartlett interfered, and she preferred her young son to me. So Sevilla was turned against me. What could I do?
And on my way to school one day, I met him and I said very pleasant, like, "Good morning, Henry." And he pulled a gun out of his pocket and shot me 4 times in the head.
Well, that's very, very sad, Henry.
Well, I died instantly, but I hear he didn't.
I shot myself with another gun. I have a picture of the gun. They wouldn't let me bring a gun today. But this is quite a fearsome weapon. It's called an Allen and Thurber pepper box, 6-barrel. It took 4 shots to drop her.
Yeah, but I died instantly. And the doctor, when they fetched him, when they had heard what he had done, they let him just die slowly. It took him 6 hours to die.
In the snow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My little brother was here, and he witnessed the whole thing. He's buried next to me. He died 10 years later.
Well, that's sad. Sorry for that. And, could you explain the epitaph on the stone?
Yes. Thus fell this lovely blooming daughter by the revengeful hand of malicious Henry. When on her way to school, he met her and with a 6 self-cocked pistol shot her. Some people think that Mrs. Bartlett, the mother of the young man that I chose to love other than Henry, wrote that and put it on my gravestone.
And could you tell me what the experience was with the fire?
Well, the fire happened when I was in 2nd grade, and usually it was my wont to go up the hill to my house on Clark Hill and have lunch or dinner with my family and then go back down. Well, the day of the fire, I started back down into town, and here the whole center of the valley was filled with black smoke. The bells were ringing, people were running and shouting, their carriages were flying all different directions, and the fire was crackling really horribly. The bells finally stopped when all the buildings were burned and the bells fell into the ashes. But so I was quite daunted by the whole thing. I saw the town hall, the Presbyterian church, the Baptist church, the firehouse, the schoolhouse, buildings, houses, all burned to a crisp. But the funny thing that I remember mostly about that day, as far as my reaction to it, was that I was relieved that I didn't have to go to school in the afternoon. Just want to show you this. This is a copy of the Boston Post cane, given by the Boston Post newspaper to almost, one of them was given by Boston Post newspaper to almost every town in New Boston, to be given to the eldest citizen to carry.
Oh, very good.
So I, Elsie, was able to have guardianship of the cane for about 3 years. And one of the nice things about being the oldest citizen in town is that you get to ride in a convertible in the New Boston 4th of July parade.
That must be very, very fun for you.
Oh, that was fine.
And you are?
I'm James Page Todd, the late James Page Todd.
Okay.
I was born in 1822 and passed away in 1917 at the age of 95.
Oh, that was quite the long age.
Right, and I was born and brought up on the homestead that my folks bought in 1814, and that property now belongs to my great-great-grandson. And for the first few years of my life, I was raised on the farm with 7 siblings. And in the 1840s, 1842 to 1850 to be exact, I was clerk of the New Boston Artillery Company. And of course our artillery piece was the famous Molly Stark cannon, which we were very proud of, and which we brought to muster of the whole 9th Regiment of the New Hampshire Militia. Us boys in town grew tired of working on the farm, and when we read articles in the paper about gold being discovered in 1849 in California, we thought that would be a great adventure. So we formed a company of 8, and we sailed, well, didn't sail, we were on a steamship from Boston to the Isthmus of Panama.
Yep.
And we hired a native to guide us over the Isthmus to the Pacific side, at which point we boarded a clipper ship, and we sailed into San Francisco Harbor. And it was just a tremendous amount of ships there at that time. And we provisioned ourselves with miner's equipment and got onto a very small steamboat and embarked up the Sacramento River to Stockton. Then we had to leave public transportation, and we hiked for 70 miles up into the hills to the town of Sonora. And there looked up the local district mining people, the company, which was basically the law there, and they had charge of selling the claims and settling the claims. And we had a claim in Columbia, which was 3 miles east of Sonora. And we set up our mining establishment and soon struck a wonderful spring. And in fact, most of our time was spent distributing the water from that spring to other miners in the area so that they could go mine their gold.
Wow.
In fact, we made more money selling water than we did mining gold.
Wow, that's
However, we
interesting.
did pretty well at that too. In fact, we were selling...
I was a very wealthy hotel man in Boston. I contributed a lot of money towards the town to rebuild after the fire of 1887. I went through many partnerships with many different people. Mr. Parker of the Parker House in Boston.
Yes.
George G. Hall.
You said you donated a lot of money to the town.
Yes.
What was the monies used for? Rebuilding? Or?
Yes, after the fire of 1887, partially, mostly the town was burned down. I donated a lot of money towards both the churches so they could rebuild. $1,000 towards the town hall and the schoolhouse so it could be put back up. And I contributed a lot of money towards building the railroad downtown to connect New Boston to the rest of the world.
We weren't thrilled over the fact that he wanted to go to war, but...
We weren't going to stand in his way. If we did, he would have run away, so he went with our blessing. He went with our blessing and enlisted with our blessing and became a Berdan sharpshooter, and he had his green uniform. He was very proud of that green uniform. It was quite good. It was quite
Cyrus
good.
knew William most of his life.
Right, but my role here is to tell how, well, poor William was shot on the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg, was left wounded, of course, because the battle continued on for a third day. He was untended, and by the time the battle was over, we went looking for him, along with the other guys from New Hampshire, and found him. He didn't live too much longer and passed away on the 4th. And we marked where his body was. We buried him so that he could be returned and brought back here and buried with his family and his friends in New Boston.
And we're very
But his
grateful.
body was on behind the Confederate lines, so we
Right.
We couldn't go there. It was at Pitzer's Woods, which was over on the right behind the Confederate lines. So
The third day, the Confederates occupied that whole area, so any Union man wounded there, you couldn't get to.
exactly,
To wait
exactly. So we had as the war was over. But when on the 4th day, the Confederates had pulled out, and Cyrus and other men of the 5th, who served under Dan Sickles, went and found a lot of the New Hampshire men.
Is a black slate stone, but you'll see that some of the stones below are signed by their makers, and there are half a dozen Marden plots here in town. The last person that was buried was Bertha Marden, who was age 98, and she's down at the lower end, and that was 34 years ago. My son was 8 years old, and she was 98 at her death, and that's the last Marden that's been buried here. If you go to the top of the hill here, you'll see a black granite marble bench, which my wife and I have bought a plot up there, and most of like the third stone up, have little sayings on them. Our bench has a saying on it, which is kind of double entendre. And when we put the bench up there, which will be effectively our headstone, our children were fairly apprehensive about us doing it at what was 10 or 15 years ago. But we did. We said, we want this bench here so you can come up and watch the view and meditate and what have you, but always bring a drink.
All right.
But be sure to spill some.
And give you a little.
And give us a little.
difficult. When you're looking at a gravestone, it was a real person. Where alternatives are books and museums, and that's not.
You don't
personal.
get the tactile feeling. Yes, there's a lot of problems, and there's been gravestone being destroyed and everything. But to be in the cemetery and actually see these things, I think there's something about it. At least once, that these people should do that at least once. If they're doing something like that, then they can continue their research and continue their studies.
It has to start with the family. The family has to have
Teaches
the
the
interest.
respect and teaches the
Right, that all of these markers are people that actually live.
Yeah.
And until, kids, and sometimes I question if it's just kids or if it, sometimes I think adults do things like that.
I agree with that.
That if they don't respect living people, why would they
respect the
dead?
Right.